Good morning. How are you?
Good. Good morning and happy birthday to you.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'm with a big 46 today.
Wow.
I know. It seems a little weird. And it's kind of weird to have a birthday while in quarantine. I don't get to normally I always like to try to take my birthday off and then do as little as I can, but that it's weird because I am home all day today. And so, but I'm working all day. What can you do? Anyway,
Yeah.
it's just our reality. So
Definitely.
Okay, so today we are talking about stress and anxiety, which is a topic we've covered with parents a lot. This was the topic that we did when we did the evening parent event in January, the only one that we were actually able to get through this year because we had others planned, but they were canceled. But this is a really popular topic because a lot of us as parents are dealing with this. I know myself, I've got two kids with anxiety. This is very near and dear to my heart because it's something that I struggle with as a parent a lot. So, what do you have to share with us today?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with the near and dear. I mean, this is why I do what I do. My own history of anxiety that started in high school and how I always have wished that, to be the person that gives somebody a light at the end of the tunnel that I didn't have back then. And so and now anxiety is just like super different right now because it's like, the stressors of what's going on. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about, the difference between stress and anxiety, how we manage it within ourselves and how we manage it with our children. And so stress is really just how our mind and our body react to the changing environment. And so again, right now everything's different, everything's changing. And so our minds are having to grapple with this. Our bodies are. So how do we get through? And stress, has kind of a negative connotation, like it's so bad for you. Stress is bad for you, but that's not actually the truth.
Mhm.
Stress can be good for you at the right levels. So, like if I have a deadline and I get a little bit anxious about it, that kind of pushes me to, to work harder. And, it can give me more energy. I can be more focused if I have just a little bit of good pressure on me. So it's when stress gets bad, when it's chronic, when it's long term, I think that's when it's negative, and that's when it causes us, to make maybe poor decisions, lack of energy. It acts more like a demotivator. And so I think trying to find that balance of like what's the healthy amount of stress for us. And I think with our teenagers, that's a hard one because there's so many expectations of them. How do we keep them in that kind of optimum stress level where they're going to perform at their best without pushing them over the edge to that like breakdown and crisis mode? I think one of the things is to really just know what it looks like in a teenager and how do we identify that in our kids. With my own kids, I can tell they become a little bit more withdrawn maybe when they're on stress overload. Some other things that you might notice would be like kids who are giving up, kids who are sleeping too much, kids who are super irritable and moody. And that's a hard one because sometimes teenagers are just irritable and moody, right? So how do we differentiate that? And I think the biggest thing is noticing behavior changes, pattern changes. If your kid's not always moody and all of a sudden they're super moody, that might be an indicator. More hostility, complaining a lot about their worries, things like that. Those are things that I would want people to be looking out for. It's a little challenging right now in these times because usually I get referrals from teachers who are noticing that kids are anxious and they're not seeing kids in the same way right now. So it's really hard to identify. So I think more than ever, it's going to be super important for parents to be able to identify that so that they can reach out and get some help. I have a list of kind of the not helpful things, and these are things that maybe my parents said to me with good intentions,
Right,
right?
right, right,
And
right.
I think that we always have the best of intentions, and sometimes we don't know what our words do to our kids. I remember my mom would always say, "We give you everything. Why are you still feeling so anxious?" And I'm like, it's not about you, mom. This is how I'm feeling, or calm down, or people have it worse than you. That kind of language I think can be not helpful. And then on the other end, it's like, for me, because I have a tendency to be anxious, I react in a way to my kids that might kind of like validate those worries for them and increase their anxiety. I don't know if you've ever done that when your kids are anxious and you're anxious too, and you kind of feed that energy.
Yeah.
Excuse me, that's something that can not be helpful. I'm going to talk a little bit about stress versus anxiety. What's the difference? And the biggest difference is that stress comes from external factors.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like people putting pressure on you. You have deadlines, things like that. Anxiety occurs within you no matter what's going on the outside. So if you have a kid who's like under no stress at all that you can think of from the outside, and they're still exhibiting signs of like, the irritability, the mood swings, the just fidgety, the just feeling anxious, that might be a little bit more cause for concern, because if we've taken away all the things that are stressful and they're still feeling like that on the inside, probably not a good sign. I wanted to talk a little bit about how we model our stress management. And the way our kids handle stress and anxiety is usually how we do, right? And so for me, because I tend to be kind of an anxious person, I know my kids have picked up on some of that. Right now with the germs and the whole thing, I think my kids have seen me be a little bit excessive in my approach to how I'm keeping everything clean. And so I'm trying to be really mindful of like what they're seeing, because I'm kind of noticing that they're picking up on some of those patterns. And we want to be safe, but we don't want to go overboard. So for you, I wanted to ask you, like, how do you handle stress within your home? And what do your kids see? Like, what would they see?
Yeah, that's an interesting, because I do certainly get stressed. I tend not to actually be an anxious person, which
Mm-hmm.
is a struggle I always have with having two kids with anxiety, because I can't relate with that, because I tend not to be anxious, but of course I get stressed. And one thing I jotted down a note to myself when you were talking, when you were giving the definition of stress and why it can be good, and that usually you see like there's an end. And so like I can have periods of stress where like I'm stressed right now, but like I can look like, okay, but in 2 weeks this will be over, and then I can relax. So I guess how I deal with stress is really kind of being in the moment with it. Like, okay, I've got these deadlines. I've got to do this. This is what's happening right now. But looking forward in my mind, like in a couple of weeks, it'll be over. And then I will have time to sit outside in the backyard and read a book. Or if it's winter time, just like curl up in my bed. And usually my stuff's like just reading a book and like, kind of like getting away and using that as an escape. That's definitely my stress release. One thing that I'm finding myself struggling with right now, and it really kind of came to a head for me personally, like yesterday and last night, I almost texted you, like, I think tomorrow when we do the video, we're going to just have to I'm going to need some therapy about my own stress. Because it really was yesterday where I'm like mapping out the end of the school year. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. And it's so hard because it's like, because I'm working from home and it's such a different, atmosphere, and the school year's ending so differently, like kind of picturing it and like figuring out what has to be done and how we're going to do it. And so I guess what's really compounding stress for me right now is, with our current reality, like there's no end date. I guess I get really focused on the end date. Like this is when it'll be over and then I can relax. And right now, I mean, yeah, I guess I keep like in my head, like May 28th, last day of school, and like that's, but you're still we're still probably going to be in shelter in place, and like what's going to, and then I start thinking about the next school year and like, how do we plan for the unknown? And that's what stresses me out, when I have to plan for stuff that's like unknown and all the different contingencies. Like I'm the type of person that if I know what my reality is, I'll make a plan for it. And I guess that's another way I deal with stress. It's just, I make a plan. And it's really hard to do that right now. And so it's stressing me out.
Well, you're right. I mean, it's uncharted territories. It's like, I would be okay handling anything if they said, okay, on August 1st, you're just going to resume life as normal. You can go on your vacations and I can, plan accordingly. But you're right. It's like, we have no idea when this might end. And that is creating that inability to have control over something.
Mhm.
It's completely out of our hands. We have no control over any of this. And I think that creates that instability of like, what do I do? How do I handle this?
So I guess I find myself like right now really trying to take it like each day at a time. Like I have my plan for that day and like, okay, I'll get through these tasks and then I'll have a little downtime and like I can, relax and, I try to manage it that way. Yeah, I don't know how successful I'm being. Some days are better than others for sure.
Oh, definitely, definitely. I wanted to share a little bit about, because I know a lot of people that I think I have this advantage in therapy of knowing what the anxiety feels like. And so it gives me this kind of leg up in being able to like connect with kids. If you haven't experienced severe anxiety, it's a really difficult thing to explain. So I'm going to try just a little bit just to kind of put people into the mindset of what their kids might be feeling.
Mhm.
Some people might be totally familiar with this. Um, when you think of like anxiety and like panic and things like that, I like to think of something super scary and traumatic. And some of the instances that come to mind is, if you were walking through a forest and a mountain lion came up behind you and you saw it and it looked scary, like what would your physical reaction be? Same thing if like, and it's kind of a scary thing to compare it to, but if somebody robbed you at gunpoint, you're not breathing, you're breathing really shallow, your heart is pounding, you feel like you're going to die. And these instances, they usually last a couple of minutes, right? So our bodies were designed to be under that intense stress for minutes,
Yeah.
right? And so what's happened is in our society, we are under that stress constantly. So that same feeling that you get of that like terror is something that becomes chronic, right? Like the kids are experiencing all the time, especially kids with anxiety. This is just the way that they feel every single day. So it becomes like compounded and it just becomes this every day. And so what that does to our minds and our bodies is it makes it really difficult for us to cope in general with anything. It makes us physically exhausted. I've heard people say that, panic attacks, their body responds the same way as if they had run a marathon. I mean, it's just exhausting, right?
Yeah.
And so I like to share that because it's anxiety is something that you can't really see. Like sometimes you see people being fidgety or things like that, but it's so internal that
Mhm.
you can't really know the struggle that your kiddo's going through. And so I think, when we're talking about like our current reality, this is chronic stress. Some of us are more stressed than others. Some of us are stressed about our health. Some of us are stressed about our finances, our family members who are vulnerable. And I don't even know how long it's been now that we've been in shelter in place, like 6 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
Thinking about your body responding to like being chased by a mountain lion for 6 weeks. Like that's exactly how people's bodies are responding. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that because it's like, okay, how do we minimize the impact that it's having on our minds, on our bodies? What can we do to help? I know that you and I both have kids that have anxiety. And so it adds additional stress to us to try to keep our kids kind of even keeled
Mhm.
while we're trying to keep ourselves that way too. And so, as parents, what do we do? How do we help? And so I have just a couple of, of things of just like, monitoring their sleep, listening to them, being flexible, providing healthy meals, encouraging them to spend time with their friends. And, now it's on the phone or, loosening our guidelines for how much phone time they get, modeling those strategies, just like trying to make the best of a not easy situation without adding extra stress. Like this is already going to be a trauma essentially for everybody. So how as parents do we not make that trauma worse,
Right.
right? Like I think we've talked about like I don't want to spend my quarantine fighting with my kids to do their homework,
Yeah.
right? I don't want to spend it fighting with them to clean the house. So like what can we do as parents to make this easier on them but also easier on ourselves? Right.
I know. It's hard. And I find myself, like I give advice, like don't nag your kids and like know when to back off. But then I find myself like this week crossing that line where I was probably nagging too much. And my, teenager's like, Mom, like, would you stop? And I'm like, but what about this class? And have you done this work? And what are you going to do about this? And blah, 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 blah. And they're like, stop. And I'm like, okay, like, all right.
Ah,
It's just, yeah, I find myself really trying to balance and reminding both of my kids to do the things that they enjoy that they can do right now. With my son, I don't have to remind him to spend time on his iPad. But like I balance like, okay, you're going to do an hour of schoolwork and then you're going to have an hour of iPad time. And so just finding that, negotiating that.
yeah.
With my daughter, it's a little bit different because I think she needs more prompting to do the things that she enjoys right now. She's definitely has a tendency to sink into withdrawing and not wanting to engage. And so, reminding her that she does really enjoy exercise, and it's lucky that she actually enjoys that because that is something that's really healthy for her to do. And so making sure that she is doing that every day. This past weekend, I got her to help me out in the garden and planting our vegetable garden so that she could spend some time outside.
Yeah.
And so, and then I find myself like kind of like selfishly, like I'm struggling too, whereas like I'm done with my work day, but then I'm like, oh, we should do some family time. We should play some board games. But I'm like, but God, I really don't want to talk to anybody anymore.
Yes.
I like, this is why I should do this because this is going to be really good for them. But God, I need to take care of myself too. And,
I think that comes with like the parent guilt, right? Like it's the same thing. Like I had a couple sessions with kids this week and then I came home and because I work outside in my anyways. And I come home and the kids are like, are you ready to play Monopoly? You said it's going to be family time. And I'm like, I just want to watch TV and lay there in silence. And so trying to like balance like the self-care and the family time. And I mean, there's just so many worries. I called Miss Shootman the other day and so, we always talk about like stress and stuff. And I'm like, I am just having a really anxious week and I don't know why. And she says, she always cracks me up. She goes, well, what do you think is contributing to this? Could it be the global pandemic with death and devastation, or is it something else? And the way she said it, it totally validated like, oh, it's okay to be stressed right now.
It's funny. One thing I've realized that I miss from, my previous life, which seems like such a strange thing to miss, but I miss my commute because it was my time that I was by myself and I could kind of like in the morning, it was my time to plan out the day and like put myself like kind of transition from home mode into work mode.
Yeah.
Because I have a 30 to 40 minute commute both ways.
I mean, it's like a great transition time.
Yeah. And so in the afternoon, evening, there's usually more traffic then, so it takes a little bit longer, but it was kind of my time to decompress. I could listen to a podcast or maybe listen to some music. And so then when I got home, I had put work away. And now I'm like, okay, this is home time, family time. I might be like tired and not energetic, but still like, I was like, okay, now I can focus on home. And I'm finding that like this working from home, like my transition and commute time is me moving from the dining room into the next room. And I don't have that. And it's like, that's been a really difficult adjustment that I wouldn't have thought because, right. Like, oh, I'm not sitting in traffic anymore. Isn't that supposed to be something that stresses you out? But, I didn't really think about the benefit that it gave my life and that I used that time.
Right. And I think that brings a good point of like the things that were stressful 6 weeks ago are not necessarily the stressors that are right now. I mean, for teenagers, it was like the classwork and the social stuff and what to wear to school. And because those things are not there anymore, there's different stressors that are taking over. That feeling of isolation. Maybe, they live with mom and dad and grandma, grandpa, whoever. And it's that like stress of just so many people around them. So it's like our stress is just different now.
Yeah.
And it's just, I have like a lot of thoughts about like how is the new normal going to be and what's that going to look like and how are we going to manage the changes that have come about. I like already kind of planning in my head of like with the new school year like what's going to be different and
Mhm.
how are kids going to be responding stress wise? As far as like what makes this situation so stressful, I think, like you said in the beginning, like that uncertainty about our health, our jobs, our future, like that lack of control that we have. It just makes it just super anxiety provoking. And I would say like the one things or the few things that I would definitely recommend for everybody is, making sure that you still have those social connections and talking to people, um, getting fresh air and exercise, trying to maintain some sort of schedule, um, trying to keep as much like normalcy as you can. Um, but acknowledging that like this is different. This is something that we've never experienced before, and just be really gentle with ourselves. If there's a day where I just need extra alone time, I'm gonna take it. I feel like that would be, super helpful.
Yeah, I think now that it's warmer outside, that's been helpful because I mean, I'm lucky enough that I've got a backyard that, is lovely and I can go sit out there and enjoy that. Uh,
Mhm.
and it's, stuff that I finding like stuff that I was doing in the beginning, like I was doing more friend Zooms and like, hanging out with our friends and now, they're like, hey, you want to do one? And I'm like, God, I've been on Zoom all day. I don't want to do one.
That's funny that you say that because I think that first week I wanted to Zoom everyone and I was
I
calling
know,
people
and
I'd
now
never
I'm like,
called.
I really don't wanna do that.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like you're still having a full work day, so you need to come home and decompress, and then let's throw teaching our kids in on top of that and see how we do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That um,
I
and
would say that for the parents that I've spoken with, I think the biggest change in like their anxiety level has been about getting kids to do work and things like that. And to that, I just, we do the best we can. We never have absolute control over what our kids do,
yeah,
and we do the best and we take care of ourselves.
yeah. Yeah, my kids are not kids that are going to just do it on their own, that I've gotta sit on them, and
Right.
some days are easier than others to do that,
Uh,
um, and I'm lucky that my husband's around too. And so there's two of us that we can try to balance our schedules. Like if I have a meeting and he doesn't, then okay, like then he's on and we can switch off. Um,
right.
I know some parents are on their own with that and it's so much harder um, because, and I think, most kids are probably this way. Like, I mean, it's hard. They're not necessarily always self-directed learners where they're going to be like, yeah, I'm totally going to do my math assignment right now
Yeah. And I
because
think for a lot of parents, there's just this surprise because we just drop them off at school and then they come home and it's like, I didn't realize that my son is so dependent on the teacher instructing him so directly.
Mhm.
And now it's my job. I'm not very good at it.
I don't know about you, but I had to reteach myself how to multiply fractions and divide fractions recently.
Exactly
And
what we're doing right now.
it was a skill that I did not ever think I was going to need to use in my life, and I've had to reteach myself. So that's been enlightening. Learning
It's not just the learning it, it's the learning how to teach it too.
rather than just be like, okay, here, I'll just do this for you.
Yeah.
No, we don't
And
want
then
to.
I think I'm on top of it, and then my kid's like, "That's not how she does it," and I'm like, "I don't know."
I know. I saw this great meme about, you know, because now we're all home teaching our kids that like the Common Core math is, these new math ways are being thrown out the window, and we're like, well, no, this is how you do long division. Let me show you. Because I totally had that conversation with my son, and he's like, I don't do it that way. I'm like, well, show me how you do it. And he showed me this. Oh my God, it was set like with these boxes and multiplication, and we do this and blah. And I'm like, why?
What?
You do it? I don't get it.
Why didn't you just add 10 minutes to your workload? I don't understand.
Uh,
Well, you're a better mom than me because I just hired somebody to help my kid on Zoom because I just couldn't.
well, that's what I can help the fifth grader. My daughter is in algebra 2, and her math, I'm like, oh, I have no idea.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, she does have a tutor that she Zooms with because I'm like,
that's awesome. I mean, thankfully, my oldest is I assume good on his own because there's no way I could do math analysis. I would just take my anxiety up like 20 more points. Um, One thing I was going to talk about a little bit is that I don't know how everybody else's kids are, but I've noticed in the last 6 weeks that mine don't want to leave the house at all. And, we went, where did we go? I think we just went on a drive. Oh, I had to put gas in my car. And when I got back in the car, um, they were like hand sanitizing me and so that's something that I've gotten a lot of emails about as well, as far as like what's a normal level of anxiety during this time for kids. And again, because my kids have always had anxiety, is it looking different for other parents, and how normal is it to have these things? And I was kind of doing a little bit of reading last night about COVID and anxiety and things like that, and I think that's to be expected. So if you're having your kids who are super turning like germaphobe, I mean, they're watching us, right? And obviously I'm a little bit on the anxious side. And so just something to monitor, like if you're noticing that, like, because some of us haven't taken our kids out at all, like
Right.
not even for a drive. So we don't know how they're going to respond. And I just, want to make sure that when that happens, and if it happens, that parents are validating those feelings, but not like over coddling and things like that. Definitely something that I'm seeing or hearing via email.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, with my son, Nathan, he never wants to leave the house no matter what.
Right.
So what I'm actually concerned about with him, because he's been the one that he never wanted to go to school, and it was always like a struggle. And now that he's been staying home and just like he's learned that like, oh, I can just do school at home, I'm actually worried about when this is over, how am I going to get him to go back and go back to normal, because he's going to be like, well, no, there's another option.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how all the kids are different? Because like one of them is like, yes. And then my other ones are like, this sucks. Like,
Yeah, I mean, Nathan, like, he's living his best life. He's like, this is amazing. I've noticed with my daughter though, when this all started the first couple of weeks, she was really kind of wanting to like push the limits on the social distancing, and could she still go on walks with her friends if they stay so far apart, and really kind of pushing the boundaries and seeing what she can get away with. And that has stopped. Like she's like, like now, like, oh, my friends want to go on a walk, but I don't feel comfortable. Like, so
oh, that's interesting.
seeing like, and I don't know if that's just, impacted the news and like where, before when this all started, like, I think about this all the time. Like, I remember on like March 16th, which was our first day that there was no school.
Right.
But I was at school because the administrators were there and the office staff were there. And that was the day before. It was like the day they announced that we were going to do shelter in place.
Right.
Shelter in place started that Tuesday. But on Monday, teachers and students weren't there, but office staff and administration was at school. And I remember talking to Nancy, Ms. Pereira, and we were talking about like, oh, there's 2,800 confirmed cases in the country. And like, now we've just passed 1 million. And it's like so much, and it's like been so fast and gotten so much worse that I think that, kids like in the beginning where it was like, oh, this isn't such a big deal and we're going to be off school for 3 weeks. And now it's, I think, sunk in for all of us, like what really like a big deal is. And like kind of like, that's scary. It's super
There's
scary.
definitely been like waves of like, like some people that like super took it seriously immediately. And then some of us were like, whatever. But I think now it's to the point where we're all kind of on the same page of like, well, most of us are on the same page of like, this is kind of scary. Like I'm going to do my part. And, at the end of the day, I only have control over what me and my family are doing. I don't have control over anything on the outside right now. And I think, like you said earlier, just living it day to day, being mindful and getting through the day. I mean, there's some days where my checklist is like, get up, take a shower, cook something, go for a walk. And then there's other days where I feel like I can tackle anything. But just living it day to day, not putting too much pressure on ourselves. It was funny because my son yesterday, he goes, Mom, you're so lucky. You don't need a therapist because you are a therapist. And I laughed and I'm like, yeah, I'm going to tell my therapist that tonight. And one of the things that she's told me is, a lot of people are feeling like, oh my gosh, we have all this time at home. We need to organize the cabinets, do this and this and this. She said, think about it like if you had a regular work day and you expected yourself to come home and do all these super duper projects and bake bread and all these things. It's like, we wouldn't do that, but you're exhausted from the work that you do, even though it looks different. So be careful not to over schedule yourself and over stress yourself out just because you're at home. Because
Yeah.
it's taxing to be here. I'm not going to lie.
I know. I mean, I find myself too, like thinking like, oh, I should, clean out the pantry or do this or organize this, and it's honestly like thinking of things that to distract from, I guess the reality of the world and
right.
is, we were talking about like different anxieties right now. And like, I'm noticing with my daughter with her exercise, like she's fine if she can exercise at home, but she doesn't like, she'll go and walk the dogs, but she's not really, wanting to go out on a walk. And I'm finding myself too, like where I can go out in the backyard, but like actually like, oh, I should go do some cardio and like go on a walk or go on a jog. There's so many people out that it kind of like, I get a little like, oh God, there's a person coming. Am I going to go this way? They're going to go this way. How do we stay 6 feet apart? And the anxiety with that. So I just know with myself, I guess I'm reluctant to leave the house and, go out.
And there's so many walkers, not everybody's walking. And like, all I can think about is, okay, I'm going to walk through their cloud of germs that they are exhaling right now. I think for now I might stick to the exercise bike at home.
Well, that was really kind of like, when I was like, okay, I'm going to buy that Peloton. And it was like, okay, because then I don't have to leave the house.
Right.
I was like, honestly like in my head, like, oh, it'll be worth it because then I don't have to leave the house.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely going to have to do some sort of training for myself and for everybody about like coming out of quarantine.
Yeah.
How do we do that, and how are we gentle with ourselves? And I mean, the thought of like shaking hands with somebody, and my husband said something about, oh, it's a good time we'll buy plane tickets to travel somewhere this year, and I was like, I'm not sitting on an airplane like ever again in my whole life.
Oh, I know. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about shaking hands and like, will that ever come back in our culture is something that's okay to do. I mean, I was always a little grossed out by shaking people's hands, like no matter what, because I never liked it. But, like how do we, is that ever going to come back? And I think about like, because I've got graduation a lot on my mind, in a traditional graduation ceremony, like I would have to shake like hundreds of hands. And
I never even thought of that.
Believe me, I have, because I would like have like in my like gown and the sleeve, like there were like these like hidden pockets, and I would have like hand sanitizer in there.
Like I never would have even thought about that. That's horrible. Like
shaking so many hands, and like I'm like. Is that going to come back someday? Like a couple of years from now when we go back to like, and we're able to do, traditional graduation ceremonies, are we going to still do that?
Oh my God.
What are we going to replace it with?
It's funny because the people in my life that I've considered germaphobes, they were like totally onto something all along. I'm like, I never thought about pushing an elevator button, that like 50 people pushed before me. It never occurred to me. I mean, I wash my hands and things like that, but this is just like, taking it. And so like, I guess that was my question earlier of like, what is safe practice versus what is like complete neurosis over this?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I just, I don't know. And like, I feel like, and that's kind of, I guess, maybe another layer of stress and anxiety right now is you don't really know who to trust. Like you hear news reports and like different things and you're like, and then you hear something that contradicts it and you're like,
totally. That was actually something I wrote down in my notes of like, we get conflicting news stories every day.
I know. I keep thinking about it because, when this first started and we were still in school, like for the couple weeks before, like I'm sending out emails to students and parents about, safety precautions and wash your hands. And I remember because like we were following like the CDC recommendations, and there was all this stuff like, do not wear masks. You don't have to wear masks. And now they're like, well, no, you have to wear masks. And I'm like, God, I spent weeks telling people not to wear masks. And now everybody's like, wear a mask.
I know. I like, it's not airborne. It is airborne. It's, if you have you can become immune to it. No, you can't. Like, what is it? And that uncertainty is definitely creating anxiety for everyone,
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. So I guess I find myself like, and how I'm coping is I think I try to avoid stuff as much as I can, definitely avoidance. I normally am somebody that is a little bit of a news junkie, and I watch the news a lot, and I'm on Twitter a lot, kind of keeping up. And I'm finding myself not doing that as much. When you're like every Sunday and your phone gives you, if you have an iPhone, it gives you like your amount of time, screen time. Mine actually went down last week.
Oh, good.
And I think it's because I've been avoiding like social media because it gets to be too much.
Too much
it stresses
information.
me out. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because the first week, I think it was like March 17th, I checked my screen. It was like 11 and a half hours one day. And it was like, I got to contact everyone. I need to stay connected. And then I think yesterday it was like maybe 2.5 hours at the most. And it's just like, I need to disconnect from the stuff that makes me feel unhealthy. And it's like, I want to know like the important stuff, but that 24-hour news cycle just becomes excessive and scary and takes away from my own self-care. So I try to limit it to like a half an hour at the most per day. But even then, there's not a lot of good stuff on the news right now.
I think that maybe lends itself to, because I feel like we've just gone off topic a little bit, which is okay. But going back to like advice we have for parents right now, and maybe having conversations with their kids about what makes them feel better right now. What is going on in their life that actually makes them feel happier and good and more in control, and then encouraging them to do whatever it is every day.
Yeah, definitely. I'm trying to not overstep. Like my older son, I noticed lately he's been spending a lot of time in bed. And I don't want to push, but I kind of want to. But then I also notice that when he's outside playing baseball with his brothers, he seems to be in a better mood. So how do I like encourage that without making him feel like I'm hovering and bothering him? And I think not, mandating that he does anything, but just in kind of encouraging him out a little bit, because we all handle it differently. So I don't know what makes him feel better right now, but that's a good thing to ask.
Yeah, I think I'm just having to like really monitor and pay attention. And even if I'm not saying anything and trying to actively change their behavior, like just watching, are they spending a lot of time in bed? Are they, not engaging? And then kind of pushing when I'm like, yeah, it's too much.
Totally. It's a fine balance. We're all learning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just say be patient with yourself, be gentle with yourself, be patient with your kids, listen, don't put too much pressure on yourself or anybody else in the house.
Yeah.
Take it a day at a time.
I know.
Deep breaths.
We will come out of this, and we'll go back to those normal everyday stresses and anxieties, right?
Yeah, we might look back and be like, man, I miss those days of those stressors. It'll happen.
Yeah.
Time. So
it will. All right. So do you have anything else? Did you cover everything?
I think I did. Yeah. I have an anxiety PowerPoint that I will have you send out to everybody. It just kind of goes into more depth about like anxiety disorders, how to get help, where to get help, what to do, what to look for, things like that.
Okay. And then parents, of course, can email you if they have any questions about that.
I'm still available for appointments. I've been seeing a couple kids a day, and I have lots of availability. So if anybody needs someone to talk to, I'm still here.
So next week, I'm proposing, what if we talked about it, kind of we touched on it a little bit today, but I think we could go into more in depth with it, the importance of sleep.
Ugh,
Because I think that that's something, it's interesting right now. I feel like in sometimes maybe we're getting more sleep, but maybe, with anxiety, maybe you're getting less sleep.
right.
Definitely, I know with myself, I'm sleeping later than I normally do. And I was actually joking with the teacher yesterday that, God, at some point we're going to have to go back to like our normal wake up time, and that is going to suck. So, but I think that just across the board, our teenagers don't get enough sleep.
Mhm.
Um, and it can really affect them. So I think that that would actually be a really important topic for us
Yeah.
to go
And
into.
I'm definitely interested to know if how their sleep patterns have changed since shelter in place.
Oh, maybe we
If
should
they
put
have,
we should put a survey out to the students this week.
that's actually a good idea. I'll do that for sure and just see kind of what's going on.
Yeah.
That sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Of course. I hope you have a happy birthday.
Thank you. All right.